What's going on, everybody? It's Josh and Stacy with the Everything Paranormal Show. Guys, welcome. And we have a good one for you tonight. We are going to be discussing near-death experiences and what's beyond death. I think we want to tap that because some people, they're going to have a near-death experience, but they're going to miss the near. Okay, so uh, we want to kind of find out, is there something, what's beyond? Maybe we want to speculate, we want to talk about that, but let's talk about some near-death experience. We've got a few different stats and things we're going to talk, theories again. And so for those of you, a near-death experience is when you almost die. A lot of times you are almost clinically dead. Sometimes there's no brain activity. There's actual scale and charts and that the doctors and scientists have, but basically you pretty much die and you come back, right? That's a near-death experience for the lay folks. So out of this, again, I'm just gonna throw a few little numbers your way just so you kind of know. Out of the near deaths that occur, about 17% of those experience some type of near-death experience. Okay, and when we say experience, that means they have something that when they were dead, they experienced something. Again, it's a little different for different people, and we're going to get into that. But ultimately, 17% of people that die and come back to life, again, they experienced something. And out of that 17%, there's about 1.7% or 10% of that near-death experiences that are negative, and we'll get into that too. Always want to hit that up because that's always interesting. So I'm excited. Stacy Talich co-hosting with me tonight. Loving it. Stacy, how you doing tonight, man? You excited for this?
Yeah, doing great. I mean, the topic just seems to be coming back over and over again, and I blame the logarithm on YouTube for that. But the concept of near-death experience has fascinated me since I was 80s and 90s, just learning about the paranormal, and it always seemed to be a generic thing when they wrote it in. People wrote their experience in their biography or whatever
Right.
it was, and they would write this big thick book talking about their life mostly, and then there'd be one chapter to their near-death experience, and then they'd move on to something else, even though the whole book was supposed to be dedicated to near-death experience. And the story seemed to be repeated over and over again. It didn't matter what book you were reading, it was always the same story,
Right.
and very generic. But this, YouTube channel that I've been hooked on recently has a wide variety of experiences of people who've gone to the other side. Some people went up and some people went down, and then when they went down, they also went back up, and then all of this stuff in between.
Right.
And they actually received true enlightenment when they came back.
Right. And we're going to dive into that too a little bit about when they come back.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
All right. Well, the whole idea is that science has come to the realization that this is real. A lot of the lower tiered scientists, even doctors, not so much, because they're very clinical and in the three-dimensional world. But the higher thinking physicists are, they're in it. The idea that this is all that there is just doesn't jive with the math. I mean, really, the math.
Right.
That there is nothing more than this. Because if that's true, all their other science is junk. So
Right.
the first law of thermodynamics is energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed. And if you die and there's nothing but oblivion, then none of the other science is real either.
Right.
There has to be something more.
Oh, yeah. And I agree. And so for those of you that that might tune into this in the very beginning and think to yourself, you know, I'm a skeptic of near-death experiences or something beyond death. I think that when we die, there's nothing more. We don't exist, things like that. Or maybe you think that this type of thinking is for a lower level people. But actually, let me tell you something. One is the academic community actually admits that mostly they lean toward supernatural experiences. Believe it or not, I know it sounds crazy, but just as kind of Stacy was alluding to, you know, when you really get some of these upper echelon physicists, professors, things like that, that really study this, there is a leaning toward some type of supernatural force, something beyond. And then there's also ones that believe in a natural side of things, which we can discuss a little bit more down the road here. But so I wanted to point out to people again, this is something on an intellectual level. In fact, there's just a couple quick little cases I want to point out. Is one, there is a physicist, or no, I'm sorry, he was a neurosurgeon, wrote a book about it. He had a near-death experience, and he wrote a book about it. It was like a number, a top seller, bestseller, number one seller, who knows, whatever. It was a seller. People read it, and in that book, he talked about some experiences that he had, but this guy knows about the brain. And when he came back to life and he studied his own case and he studied his near-death experience, he realized his brain function was not operating. There was no registered brain function during this period when he experienced this whole world full of this memory. I think it was like he met a sister, somebody that hadn't been born or he never met. There was butterflies and colors and all these things and this whole other realm. So my point is that this guy is a top neurosurgeon. He went on to, and again, academically very acclaimed. People respected him again, and he circulates that that NDE. We're going to be calling near-death experiences NDEs to kind of save a little bit. We're going to shorten it up. So NDEs is when we say that means near-death experiences. So this guy is around the near-death experiences. Also, one of the things I wanted to note too was that there was confirmed. There was another case. I was trying to think of it real quick, but anyways, there has been confirmed moments when people's brain function have been documented as to not exist. There was no activity whatsoever, yet they experienced. Now, I do want to point out that a lot of times these NDEs, they have sort of two main categories when people experience things. They have confirmed and they have, unconfirmed. So confirmed, here's a couple of examples, and then I'm going to let Stacy kind of really dive into some of the points I bring up, is that with confirmed, or let's just say unconfirmed first, these are like when people when they're dead, then maybe they overhear conversations, or they have these different visions, maybe the out-of-body experience. They see themselves on the operating table, but what they see really can't be confirmed or really be anything unique. Now, confirmed is when they have a vision or an experience, where they can actually confirm it. In other words, there has been some cases where people had heard conversations with their doctors while no brain activity was going on, conversations that were confirmed by the doctors later that said, yes, we did talk about those things. This was exact, and yet you had no brain activity. Those, what they call confirmed experiences. Okay. So, and there is documentation of that. Now, just because you have an unconfirmed experience doesn't mean you didn't experience it. I just wanted to kind of point out when you start hearing some of those terms, if you start watching some videos, or if you look at the University of California does a lot of research for NDE. There's a lot of professors and stuff that study it. There's NDERF or something like that. There's a whole thing online. That does a foundation work or something for NDEs. But anyways, I'm going to turn it over to Stacy for a little bit. I had my little run of I just wanted to point out some of that stuff initially. So
yeah, well, and on the topic, the confirmed, there's a cardiologist. I think it's out of California, where he got all of these people that had died on his table and then come back. Multiple occasions he had patients talk about the things that they heard in the room, even though that they were clinically dead at the moment that they were having their heart worked on, or something with the anesthetic, whatever reason, they went dead, and they came back or were revived, and they talked about what was going on in the room while all of that was going on. The doctor wanted to make sure that it wasn't some sort of subconscious hallucination that was taking place, and it was there's more activity going on in the brain that they were actually read. So he wanted to make sure that it was an actual thing. He put on on top of one of the cabinets in the operating room, he wrote out on a big piece of cardboard the words "Don't go," and he set it on top of the cabinets. Nobody knew that he had done that. The staff didn't know it was there. He was the only one that knew it was there, and he waited until it happened again and asked them, well, did I have a sign on one of those cabinets that I wrote out? What did it say? And they said, "Don't go." And at that point, he's like, "All right, this is worthy of science at this point, because that was a blind, test, and this one just passed it. So there's obviously something going on here." And he started to do research and became one of the leading researchers on the whole concept of near-death experiences, trying to find commonalities. And
now usually, like, I personally like, and I wrote about this in my book, and I talk about the two main types of death. I categorize death in two ways: expected and not expected.
Yeah.
Okay. So expected deaths are your terminal deaths or things like that, things of that nature. When people know they're going to pass away, they know death is imminent. They have time to mentally prepare. They have time to, again, just get it together, so to speak, or face their death. That's usually an expected death. Then, of course, your unexpected death, well, that could be any other the thousands of ways that you can die. But sudden deaths, things where when you walked out the house, you did not plan to die that day or whatever, or in that moment. So anyways, the point is I think that sometimes when you look at both versions, people that suddenly die and people that know they're going to die, there seems to be different accounts of when they're near death, or people that have come back from death. And I find that intriguing because I researched a lot of cases where you had people that were terminally ill or elderly, and they knew their time was coming. And in fact, it's almost like they started getting visited by, let's just say, angels. Now, I do want to clarify that when I talk, I'm going to use terms that could be considered Christian or whatever. But again, folks, you can substitute angels for aliens, other dimensions, Buddha, God, Jesus, whatever you want to do. I'm just letting you know. I'm just talking in terms. Relax. These are just accounts. So, but people start to be visited by their relatives, angels. They start even hearing music, like angelic music. There's been a lot of these type of reports. And what I find fascinating, to me, it almost seems that when you're going to pass away, it's almost like there legitimately is a welcoming party that is sort of waiting to help guide you through the portal. Okay. When I mean the portal, like, we can talk more about the other side, but whether you want to call it the white light, but when you pass away, remember, you don't have legs. You're energy now. You don't have a mouth. You don't have hands and things. You don't move like normal and things like that. So I think that these welcoming parties can help assist you. And there's a little slight gravitational pull to the light. So I think that, again, according to all the different cases and kind of, looking at down the middle, it seems as if you're sort of pulled to the light, but there's a welcoming party to help make sure you make that transition to the other side. Now, the opposite side is your unexpected death, right? And that is when, again, you can suddenly die. There's been a lot of reports from near-death experiences where there was a light. Some people went into the light and then they were turned around or sent back. They talked to somebody. There's all kinds of different things. And I'm going to let Stacy talk about a few things that he's heard about that too. But either way, they come back. Or in some cases with death, they don't come back and they're trapped or they're stuck. They don't go into the light and they're actually in between things. Maybe they're afraid to go into the light. Maybe they avoided the light, whatever it is, but they just didn't go. And that's probably a small fraction of people that don't actually go into the light. Most people, when they pass away, they're going to go into the light. It's sort of a natural progression. So Bob's in the chat. It's good to see you. He said, I had a nurse in our disaster response organization who gave me the details of her near-death experience that happened the night before. She had many confirmed observations before the experience. Yeah, dude, that would be cool. We definitely need to get you. We need to hear about those. That sounds cool. When you talk to somebody, I don't know if I can't remember if I've ever really talked to. I think I've talked to people that were close to death. I'm not sure if I had ever personally talked to anybody that had like a true like near-death experience type thing. But in any case, Stacy, so now that I kind of covered like the two types of death and a little bit of what I've kind of seen that seems to happen, you take it from there.
Yeah, and hey, Bob, he said that she now has no fear of death. That's one of the points we were trying to get to, right? Is that people who go through these near-death experiences, the commonality of everybody is that they no longer fear death because they know it's more real over there than it is here. Everything is more everything. You see in 360 degree angles. I mean, it's not the 180 degrees for, just from side to side, from peripheral to peripheral. It is complete, sight in 360. You feel everything more intensely. The common one, when you of the stories of the near death, which I was referring to before with the books, is that you go out of body, you look above your body, you see the things that are going on in the room, and then you go through this tunnel of light. You see, grandma, Nana, Uncle Joe, whoever, and they turn around and they send you back. Those are the common themes of the stories from the books, but people who are, nowadays they're getting far more detailed. What they went through. Some of them, like I said, went to hell and experienced what it was like in hell. That it was like a prison dimension. It was dark. It wasn't hot, fires of damnation licking their nipples or anything. It was, cold and dark and separated from divinity. And it was like you were fresh meat in the new prison planet, and all the other prisoners saw you as fresh meat, and they just wanted to hurt you because you were new. You were a new toy to play with. And, right. People who were disemboweled, they were raped, and, 30 seconds in this world felt like a decade.
Right.
It just never ended.
And coincidentally enough, too, most people that had negative experiences, most of them did not actually experience the torture themselves. It was like witnessing torturous events and things like that. So yeah, I mean,
Well, the one guy I'm referring to specifically that I saw his YouTube channel, it actually says, I was in hell, in the title of the thing.
I
So
think
of
I've seen
course,
that one too.
yeah, I had to click on it. So I, watched the whole thing, and he was a professor of arts in uh, it was either France or Italy, or it was overseas. He was an American who was a tenured professor in an overseas university, and he was basically an atheist who didn't believe in anything. And he was, on top of the world as far as money was concerned, and that kind of stuff. And then he had a problem, went to the hospital, died in the hospital, and then went to hell, essentially. And when he literally was describing it, he was disemboweled, lying on the ground with all of these people. They weren't creatures, but they were just the worst of the worst, tearing at him. He heard the voice, you know, pray. And he didn't really understand why he needed to pray at that point, because there was nothing to pray to. He was just a victim of what was going on. And they said it louder, and he heard it, pray. And he couldn't remember any prayers because he wasn't a Christian in that sense. He hadn't been to church since he was a kid. So all he could remember was, the beginning of the Lord's Prayer, the first sentence, and the people around him, as soon as he started to say it, they just went nuts. They were, threatening to, really hurt him at that point, because he was, invoking, God.
Right.
But he couldn't remember anything past the first sentence. So he just kept repeating the same sentence over and over and over again, and then just blurted out, save me, Jesus. And boom, the light came down, popped him up into heaven, and he was standing there next to Jesus.
Yeah, I mean, that's crazy. And then Bob brings up a good point too, is that he said that she said that she was told it wasn't her time and that she had a choice to stay or go back. And that's not the first time I've heard that with some NDEs. People have reported that as well, that when they were talking to, whether it was God, Jesus, or a relative, usually when they were talking with somebody informed them, hey, it's not your time, but you can stay if you want. And of course, obviously they came back, or else we wouldn't have known that. But I don't think everybody said, I chose to stay. So that's how that turned out. I guess if I got that on dowsing rods or something.
Well, then you wouldn't, want to come back with your ghost costume. But
Right.
The whole idea behind this experience this guy had is that even when he was dead, he had been in hell. He got plucked out of hell. He was standing there in front of Jesus, and Jesus was basically the embodiment of love, and had a really good humorous nature about him. He just was not some stiff deity kind of thing where it's thou shalt not the whole time. He related to him on a very personal level, and then Jesus gave him the option, do you want to go back? Because if you can go back. And he's like, well, wait a minute, what's with this? If God is so good, he started getting into a philosophical debate with Jesus about why things are the way they are, because he didn't want to go back because everything is so screwed up back there. People are mean all the time. They're trying to kill each other. God doesn't do anything. He just lets it happen. Why would I want to go back there? And they went back and forth for a while. He actually argued with God on whether or not that would be a good thing. And he got real answers to why things are the way that they are. And most of it came down to Jesus like, well, let me show you.
Right.
And, showed him the whole world essentially from up above, like a drone. Why people are the way that they are is because everyone is covered. It's like a fog or a veil that is over every human, that prevents them from seeing the world the way that it really is. And
Right.
that's part of the challenge. You know, being a good person despite not knowing what is actually happening on the other side.
No, and one thing I would definitely want to bring up, and I think that's really fascinating when people talk about who they meet, what they were like, these type of things. Now, I did hear Jesus was pretty cool, laid back. Like, and if you think about it, according to the stories, uh, he seemed to be kind of like the Elvis of the time. He had like an entourage going around. He made good jokes. He was definitely brought the wine to the party, so to speak. So he was a happening guy, but I guess he did. He had like a sense of humor, very likable. So that sounds pretty cool. So Bob says she was. She said she was told it wasn't. Oh yeah. What is sad is she didn't dare mention it to the doctors and nurses because it could have killed her career as a nurse. So that brings up a good point. And this is actually something I was going to cover. Is that especially in the negative ones, they say again about 10% of near-death experiences, which is about 1.7% of NDEs, are negative, but there's a lot of speculation among the academic community that there's probably a lot less of those reported. Because, I mean, think about it. If you told people, hey, man, I went to hell, what I perceived was hell, then you're sort of admitting that you are like a very bad person or that you're this ultimate sinner, and and people start looking at you like, what the hell are you doing behind closed doors? Why are you going to hell? Because they probably perceive you as a normal person or whatever. Or then some people might agree, like, no, dude, you're definitely going to hell. Yeah. But no, I think that it brings up that point that there probably is people that are not. And then even I would say even that 17% is not entirely accurate, because I think again there's going to be your people that have experiences. They come back, they know what they experienced, but they don't know how to communicate it to people. They don't know if it was just a dream. Maybe they hold on to that. It's very vivid. And maybe later on they talk about it, or they talk about it in closed doors and they don't bring it up to any documented scientists or anything, anybody that's documenting things. So I think the number is probably a little higher than that on both sides of the spectrum. And the other thing I wanted you to touch on too, Stacy, also, if you want, is the there's a variety of people. It seems like there's a lot of people that also will get a life review when they are dead. People are clinically dead for sometimes a short amount of time, but yet in this short amount of time, it's almost as if time stands still and people get almost like an entire life review. It's crazy. So if you want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, that's another commonality. They all have, and they describe it the same way. There's the whole life review, both good and bad, and they actually have it separated that way. It's not a linear from birth to death life review. It is what you did good and what you did bad, and what you considered to be good wasn't really good. It was actually not that important, and what you considered to be unimportant was actually very important. This same guy I was telling you about, the professor, he had the same thing going on where he got a life review, and he saw all of the things that he did and all the things that he was really proud of. He got his, PhD. He got awards for this, awards for that. He got, tenure. All of these things that he thought were the most important things in life. The angels, we'll call them angels for now, the people who were reviewing it with him were kind of shaking their head, like, yeah, that's not really, what your mission was about. And then they showed different moments when he was at a checkout line and he gave the woman in front of him $5 because she was a single mother and she couldn't pay for her groceries. And she started to sort through things she was going to, put back because she didn't have enough money. He said, here's $5. She got the food. And, the angels saw that and they were just like, holy shit, that is like the greatest thing in the whole world. You just did that. Did you see that? That was awesome. That was the best thing you could have ever done. Right? And he's like, not really seeing the same way. After a while, he started to recognize that his mission to be here wasn't to adorn himself. It was to lift up others.
Right.
And that is essentially everybody's mission. But we get lost in the minutia of what it means to be a person in this world. The whole idea of thinking or doing something bad to someone isn't just it. The act is not it. It is the thought that precedes it, which is just as bad.
Right.
Because you send that out. Nothing can manifest itself without thought. It has to be thought of first, and that thought goes out. But it also comes back. So you do things to someone that hurts them. It has a butterfly effect, and it spreads throughout the planet.
Right.
Thoughts do the same thing, even though that the person who you're thinking wicked things about probably deserved it, doesn't help or hurt them as much as it hurts you.
That's why I try to send out a like an attack killer. So when I send out that negative thought, I have to immediately send out a good thought to go kill it. Because I have, I've done that. I'm like, God, I'm like, I'll be driving or something, whatever, road rage, whatever. And, I'll just be like, yeah, die in a fire, whatever. But then I have to turn around and be like, no, Lord, forgive me, whatever. So I have to send out like the cancel karma, and try to block that. And sometimes just random thoughts will pop in. And I like to think like that's just some of that evil influence that's always trying to peck at people, and that devil like on your shoulder that they always talk about, And so sometimes that evil thought pops in your head and it's like, no, that's stupid. Like, why did I think that? Get that out. Like Zowie, you got to just, cancel that away, or if you let it ride, then yeah, I think that karma will come back to you for sure.
Well, it wasn't very long ago where that was considered to be an actual, curse, the evil eye. Somebody looks at you with a stink eye because they're pissed off at something that you did. That was a real curse that you could be, convicted of in court, for, hurting someone.
It's probably legal. It's probably still in the law somewhere in some of these states.
I mean,
the way they have, those obscure laws that they forget about.
Well, the idea is that we talked about witchcraft in a few episodes back, and the idea, the difference between a curse and, seeking justice, seeking the karma, is literally in not making it about you. If you are sending out, a curse that says, make that woman's tits fall off, things like that, that's a curse. You are actually sending that out, and it's going to be coming right back at you. But if somebody's wronged you and you ask for justice for something that they have done, that's not the same thing. And being able to detach yourself from the emotion and the hate and all that is really, what we're here for.
Oh yeah.
And that seems to be the common theme with these NDEs too.
Yeah, I feel like, and I'm going to cover Bob's comment real quick too before we lose that. And he said, life reviews give the soul an overview as to what they need to focus on during their next incarnation to help their spiritual growth, or reincarnation, I imagine. So yeah, I mean, if you believe that you're the type that comes back, and you have to keep continually fixing your next journey, your next go around in this life, then certainly that would make sense. If at the end you get this full review, and then you're like, oh yeah, I can see all the places I fucked up, so yeah, okay, I'm gonna try a little better. But my problem is like, hey, if that was the case, then why don't I remember this in my next life? That's the problem. See, I want to be able to remember these things in my next life, so I don't do those same mistakes. But anyways, that's probably why
Well, there's stories
that's
of
why
the
I'm on a merry-go-round that never ends, man.
people who've done that too. Children seem to, under the age of 5, have a better recollection of their previous life than post 5 years old.
I know, but that's reincarnation. We're not getting stuck on that because that's
I
a
know.
whole other world, and I love talking about that. So we're gonna circle back. Oh, I hate that phrase. We're gonna go back to NDEs here, and I want to talk about a little bit more about when they have these epiphanies. I personally think that when they go and, like you said, they get to see what truly matters, and they come back, they restructure their life into this positive life. Now there hasn't been a lot of studies done on people that have negative experiences and how it's like for when they come back. But actually, I would say that both, whether you go there and have what they call a positive experience or negative experience, I actually think the outcomes are the same. What do you think?
Well, yeah, they come back. Yeah.
I'm talking about the lesson. Like I think that the lesson that they gain when they come back to real life and they live their life after that NDE, I think people that go through like maybe that hellish experience or the people that go through talking to Jesus, whatever, I think when they come back, I think they pretty much both learn the same lesson and they both start doing more positive things in their life.
Not
And that's
just
why I said, what
not
do
just
you think?
positive things, like charity work, but also redoing everything in their life. The professor that was tenured, he quit. He decided he wasn't going to do that anymore because it wasn't fulfilling what he thought was his mission anymore. And this is one of these jobs. It's a lifer. You've got it for the rest of your life if you want it. And he just walked away because what he saw was that his whole reason for being here wasn't to be a tenured professor. It was to help people. And people who come back have that same outlook just immediately. They'll divorce their spouse. They'll drop the baggage of friends and problems and obtaining junk, new cars, new houses, things of that sort no longer mean anything to them. They would live in a cardboard box if they thought it would do any good. It was the idea that their reason for being here is completely different. And the radical, I don't know, born again experience gave them the one guy that I was just talking about, the professor. He's like, I don't have faith. I don't have faith. A preacher who crossed over and came back said the same thing. He lost his faith because he has knowledge now. It has nothing to do with belief. It has everything to do with knowing. He's been there, believing that you are, doing something doesn't do anything for you. It is the idea that and this is your new life, and this is what your real mission is.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder how many people again, and I want people to understand too that don't think that everything. Again, I brought this up. If you're Christian, then by all means follow your faith. If you have a near death experience and you meet Jesus or you see angels, by all means, that's fine. Like, don't ever think that anybody don't let people take that away from you. But at the same time, too, if you're not Christian and you have experiences, again, you need to just understand what they are and they're positive. Period. These are things to learn. You don't have to follow a certain religion. And that's the thing. And Stacy brought this up earlier too. on the spiritual side of things, there was atheists that had, near death experiences. You had different people of different faiths that had very similar experiences. So again, don't get caught up in a particular narrative or whatnot, but just think about the lessons learned from those things, and then follow your heart. And that's what I tell people all the time. Follow your heart after that. I mean, it'd be curious to see how many of those NDEs, how their lives turned out later. You know what I mean? Like after the fact. I know some of them obviously tried to turn their life around, but it's interesting to see did they learn that lesson, and what happened to their life after that long term. Did they actually change, or is it for the better? I mean, all those things. So
as far getting on the atheism thing, I honestly don't believe there is such a thing. There is no such thing as a pure atheist, because atheism means that you only believe in the aesthetic, the physical, world. That's the only thing. They don't have any other belief beyond that. Atheism in itself is a belief system.
right.
It's something that they can verify through their own senses, but it's still a belief that is all there is.
Right.
And most atheists, if you can nail them to the floor, they'll say, well, I'm not saying it, there is no God. I just don't believe that he's real. And they actually describe the Christian definition of what God is. They don't believe in that. So because they don't believe in that, there is no God. And I'm like, well, then you don't have, that's just the Christian view. You don't have to do the Christian view in order to recognize there's God. Einstein wasn't an atheist. He believed in God. This is the smartest man that's existed for the last 200 years, and he believed in God. What makes you so smart?
Right.
That kind of thing. When it comes right down to it, there's no such thing as a pure atheist, because they recognize that there's things they don't know.
Now there is a supposed scientific explanation, which we don't have to get into. I'm not going to read it. I'm not going to break it down. But essentially, there is a scientific explanation of why there is a lot of reports of people seeing the light, seeing a tunnel with the light at the end. And there is an effect that they talk about. And they say it occurs, it's like 0.03% or something like that.
Yeah.
Some extremely low number. My problem with that is that if there is a scientific explanation for seeing a light at the end of the tunnels per se, again, some of this occurred with no brain activity, things like that. There was no definite science per individual. But my point is this: is if there was a scientific explanation, like, hey, this is why you see a light because this happens and this happens and this. I've read it before, but I'm just summarizing, saying, you know what? If there was, I think we would see it a lot more often, and it doesn't have to necessarily be. But I think you'd have a much higher percentage in near deaths, because they would say, hey, I saw some light, and then whatever, but I didn't have any other experience, and they're just like, oh. But I think that the number would greatly reflect more toward NDEs versus such a small sliver fraction, the way that they scientifically describe it. So that's why I think, like, to me, it's just that lower tier scientists trying to come up with some bullshit saying,
yeah,
hey,
to rationalize it.
Like, this is why you see it. No, shut up, dude. Like,
yeah, I mean, they've done brain surgery where the visual cortex is exposed and they poke it in the middle of surgery, and the people who are awake, while they're having their brain worked on, they say, tell me what you see now. And then they poke the back of their brain and they start seeing this light. It's like,
I see a finger.
I mean, tell me what you see. And then you flash a bulb in front of their eyes. Oh, that just means it must be fake now because they saw the light and I did it too. It's like, dude, that's not what we're talking about. recreating the same environment. You're just inducing it because you're hitting the visual cortex.
That just sounds like those things, like, like the 52 card pickup trick, or like, hey, do you want to see the stars? And they just clock you in the head. That it just seems like that kind of thing. So
Going around a Grateful Dead concert saying reality for sale,
right.
because everybody's like really detached from reality during a Grateful Dead concert.
So I'm glad you transitioned into my next little thing, and that is the Grateful Dead. So believe it or not, this is actually a legitimate thing. You actually hit the keyword. You win the prize. So there is some naturalists out there that what the naturalists do is they say, look, we're not saying that NDEs don't exist. What we're saying is it's not supernatural. It's not always supernatural, that there's an alternate explaining or explanation. And one of their things that they actually use is some accounts from Grateful Dead tours and things. That's why, again, you said the key word, but LSD experiences. So apparently, when all these, when they were doing research on LSD and talking about people that were hallucinating during these drugs, what they experienced, and they've said that actually there's quite a bit of similarities between what people experience with LSD and near death experiences. So that's kind of their argument for, like, hey, the human brain, even if there's no brain activity. But again, that's where I kind of fall into the line of, I would understand that if there was like minor brain activity and the brain was bleeding down the spinal cord, causing hallucinations and stuff. Like, I would get that. But when some of this stuff, these near-death experiences are occurring when there's no brain function, that's pretty crazy. To me, that says when your physical body is done with, all this is happening on an energy, spiritual level. What do you think?
Well, there's the argument that can be made that when you actually do die, because when you die, it's not an instant, you're alive, you're dead. It actually, you go through stages of death as you are dying. It happens quicker with some people than others, but if you're in the hospital and you are dying, it is a process. And in the last process before you actually, cease brain activity, is your brain actually squeezes out a shit ton of DMT. DMT is the active molecule that is in LSD, in ayahuasca, in magic mushrooms. It is the molecule that your brain is constantly producing and uses primarily when you sleep, but it neutralizes it as it's dumping it. So you have two chemicals that are created. One neutralizes the other. When you die, the one chemical isn't produced, and your brain dumps a shit ton of DMT, and you start to hallucinate at that moment. But it's very short lived because your brain then ceases to operate. It's literally the last stage of death is that DMT dump. People go on these quests to South America for ayahuasca to essentially have this DMT dump get them to experience not the near death experience itself, but something that is very similar to it, where they get in contact with the spiritual realm. And unlike your life flashing before your eyes, all you get is all of the shitty things that you ever did. Not all the good stuff, but all the shitty things. So you can come to terms with what kind of an asshole you really are. And a lot of people need that on these ayahuasca trips, especially if they're fighting addiction, because people go down there with heroin, crack, meth, cigarettes, any kind of addiction that they just cannot shake. They go down there for 3 days and it's done, because literally confronted all of their demons all at once, and they come back and they're essentially changed too, very much like an NDE experience. Even though it is not the same thing, it's very, very similar because they broke the veil without actually crossing over. But that's the argument of science, is that it's actually DMT that is causing this at the moment of death. It's creating this whole. It's not the same thing at all. Even though that the process may be the same, it's not. You can it's like poking the back of the brain. You can simulate or fake it with something else and say that that's what it is when it's really not, because you're not creating the same environment, the same parameters.
Right. Now, Bob did say how many leftovers in the refrigerator cross over when you open the door.
For me, none. I freeze dry my stuff.
All right. Or I just eat it all. That's why I'm fat. So there you go. A lot crosses over in my house. Crosses over and down the drain. All right. So definitely one of the things I also wanted to talk about with NDEs, because it is a fascinating subject. A lot of people have experienced those things. Oh, that's weird. Okay. Sorry about that. I was like, I keep hearing this noise and it was distracting me. And I know it's raining outside, but I just realized that the phantom we have hanging outside from Halloween still is being triggered by the rain. So he's just like out there going off, like talking over and over. And I'm like, I'm like, what the hell's that noise? And it's really faint in my studio. So, okay. Anyways, now that I was distracted by that, but no, I think that with NDEs, and it's still such a fascinating subject to me because of, again, the people that experience these things. There's so much similarity in most of their stories. They do differ. There is the variances, but as a collective whole, there's something to be learned from that. And again, can you take that away? As someone once said, it's like the Grand Canyon. It's pretty, it exists, it's real, but it's something that people can take something away from it. It's something that's beautiful. So it's a positive thing, really. It's real. And these experiences, whether they are real or not, there's something that people can take something away from. And whether it's a lesson, life lesson, and apparently that's what a lot of them take away from it. Almost their Scrooge moment sometimes, and they come out of that.
That's what Dickinson had one of these years. He never documented or said anything, but the way he went about the Scrooge story, the Christmas Carol, it's like, seriously, he must have had that experience and decided to, put it into a story himself.
Yeah. I mean, what if the whole story of Scrooge is him having a heart attack and laying there in his mansion, going through this? Maybe he died, but then went through and came back to life. People have done that on their own. The human body wants to live. And he came back after this, and it may not even been that long, or it could have been, at night.
There's one story of a woman who died of cancer. She went through all the stage 4 cancer. She was racked with it. She died. She went to the other side. They asked her, "Do you want to go back?" And she was confused because she said, "Well, I just died of cancer. You can't really come back." It's like, no. You can if you want to. If you really want to, we'll heal you and you'll be fine. And she's like, "Okay, let's do that." And she comes back, and she was dead for like 10 minutes. It was like, brain dead, everything, for like 10 minutes. And she just pops back in. And within a week after coming back, all of her cancer was gone. So it was like one of these things where she was healed, her body was healed on the other side for her to come back and complete her mission. I mean, it was one of these ideas that the spiritual body is actually where the disease begins. And if you heal the spiritual body, the physical body will mimic it. And that's really where we get a lot of the New Age spiritualism from.
Right.
It's, you know,
yeah,
I don't know if I'm all with that, but, you know, I can't say they're lying either.
Now, I want to take a darker turn on this because I like stories like Pet Sematary and stuff where they come back, but they come back like some evil form of something. Like that's because I love that. One of my favorite types of stories are from like the Twilight Zone days. I love the twists when reality takes that unexpected turn that you wasn't thinking of, and again, even something like Pet Sematary, where it's like the idea of saving an animal or a child or a wife, and having them come back in this form. They come back to life, but it's not the same. There's definitely something different, and I love that twist. There's another great short film I love, and I don't even want to give away this ending at all, but it is such a good short film, and I can't remember if it's called The Doll, but you might have to check it out. I really enjoy it. I love it because it's so cool. All I can say is that it starts out, there's like this creepy dude, and he plays a good part, and he's like a doll maker. But it starts out like their child is laying there dead in a casket. Like, you know what I mean? And he's talking about, I need a lock of hair. I need a button. I need something that they wore recently that hasn't been washed. It's almost like this voodoo type shit, whatever, the stuff that about, right? So it could have been you. I don't know. They could have been representing you in this. I don't know. But maybe you do this for people. But this guy made this doll, but you see this boy, and then all of a sudden it like flips to this, I don't know, almost like a Raggedy Ann kind of doll. It's not even that lifelike, it's just buttons and this and that. And the husband's standing over there, and he's just like, yeah, tell her what you created, a stupid doll. And she touches the doll, and all of a sudden her boy's like there, and he's like alive. She's like, oh my God. She picks him up and she's loving on him. And then the husband looks over and she's loving on this raggedy doll, but she is touching it. So he's like, why don't you come over and touch this stupid doll? He kind of mocks him, and so the husband goes over and touches him, and it's the boy. And he was like, oh my God, and so anyways, there's some rules, and not like gremlin rules, like feeding them after midnight or anything. But there is some rules, and the short story is really good. I don't want to give away. I don't want to give away what happens after that. You have to watch it, but I love stuff like that. I love when it has an alternate reality. In fact, one of my favorite, if you guys ever remember the old Twilight Zone shows, the Rod Serling ones, black and white, one of my favorite, I always found this, and I loved so many Twilight Zone episodes, but one of my favorite, and I think it was just because of the idea, and I was young, and it was like the guy with the watch that could freeze time, the little stopwatch, the pocket watch. It's like tick, 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 tick. And then he could just stop time, and everybody would just freeze, and he could walk around like, "Ooh, look at me!" And then he could, boom, and and everybody's back to like life, So that he started getting greedy, and next thing you know, he's robbing banks. He's like, "Stop!" And he'd walk in with his cart, start loading up money, walk out, boom, tick, tick, tick. And you're like going, oh my God. Because, when you see these things, ultimately your devilish mind is like on board with this going, well, when you have a device that can stop time, you start thinking some bad things. but what is so cool is he's like robbing a bank. He's so happy, and he just like drops the pocket watch or whatever, like right as he's pushing this cart, and he like breaks the watch, and he's like frozen in time, and he's just like no, and it's just such a great ending. Like it's something you were just like not even probably expecting. You're just watching this going, oh wow, and then when it happens, you're like, oh my god. And this of course was, this is when you didn't see. Now of course you see a lot of remakes of the same lessons, but I just think things like that are so cool. But I'll get off my little thing on that. What do you think about those kind of alternate realities of things coming back different?
Yeah, well, I mean, the darker stuff of what I've been told by spirits, what's been even written about in like the Book of Mediums, which was I talked about that a long time ago, is a book that was written by Alan Kardec in the 1900s, the early 1900s, around the turn of the century, when the whole idea of the parlor seances and the table tipping was all in vogue. They did all these seances and then interviewed spirits in these seances, and he wrote it in a book. Anyway, the idea that the darker side of things isn't just one hell. It's not even like Dante's hell, where it's 9 levels, that kind of
Right.
Anyway,
he wake up from his nap.
And spirits themselves understand, once they're in these realms, that they have the opportunity to level up. They can leave these areas if they so choose, but they can't do it on their own. They have to either get the help of divinity directly, or they have to earn their way out. And that's by doing the good deeds that they were too shitbag to do in life. Helping other people accomplish goals, helping other people do the things that they were trying to do.
Right.
And that's, it's sort of like the opposite of what they show you in The Ghost Whisperer, where big boobied women are helping spirits go into the light. It's actually the other way around, where the spirits are actually helping us go into the light, helping us accomplish our goals. But they're the darker spirits. They're not evil. They did not just bad things, but they were completely misguided in how they lived life.
Right.
They didn't help anybody else. They didn't elevate themselves or anyone else. So, they're in hell essentially, but it's not, fires of damnation kind of hell.
Right. Now, what about Flatliners, the old 1990 movie with, Kevin Bacon and was it Kiefer Sutherland and Julia Roberts and stuff? See, that was about think about it. That it would almost make sense. You would get some type of like college students or a group of young scientists, whatever, and you would think like, oh man, like I want to study near-death experiences. Mm-hmm. So they purposely are trying, of course, it takes a darker turn.
Well,
but think about it. That's
they actually stole that. Well, they didn't steal the story, but the story itself is the Epic of Gilgamesh, where even like the tribulations or the trials of Hercules, different things of that, where they descend into Hades, right. And even with the Odysseus in the Odyssey, descended into Hades. The thing of it is if you ever go into hell, you can't escape yourself without someone else taking your place. So the whole idea of Flatliners was you cross over to the other side. You can't just go. You can't just leave. You have to. Somebody has to take your place. Right. So that's where the spirits start coming back and start haunting these people to, steal their souls and all this other kind of stuff, because, you can't just leave. It's not allowed. You have somebody. You've now created a slot that needs to be filled. So, yeah, that was great. I love that story.
Yeah, and especially I had to bring it up because I knew it was like something that really is kind of like what we're talking about with the whole near death. It related. Um, so other than that, I think I personally think we covered a lot. It's really hard to have a true NDA or NDE sort of like debate, or even not even just debate, but just an educational sermon on it, because there's some places that will give you facts and information, but they're not exactly entirely accurate. Some places are trying to get you to be like, no, 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 there's no spiritual stuff, man. This is all explained, and they really try to downplay it. Then but again, the academic folks still are leaning towards supernatural. So that again, there's just so much debate out there, a lot of weird stats going around. It's hard to get actual numbers. So the numbers I put out there were some of the common type numbers that I seen among when I was doing research before. And so, did I have anything else I jotted down on my notes? No, we covered about everything in my notes. But it's so hard for people. But I just wanted to. I think when you had the idea for doing NDEs tonight, I thought that was pretty cool, and I wanted to really just talk about it on a general level and what we thought about and what we heard and knew, and maybe even death experiences, and that's why I kind of brought up expected deaths versus not expected deaths, because sometimes people say, well, how come when my grandpa Joe was laying on the bed and he was dying, and he heard angels, or he heard this and this and that. Again, these are, I look at it as different experiences in a way. Again, with expected deaths, it's as if again, God, or whatever you want to call it, but if God is saying, hey, this is your time, and I we know it's going to happen, then there's like prep, there's the welcoming party, and they welcome that spirit. So when the moment he or she passes over, and then energy comes from that body, then they can help assist that energy and bring them home, so to speak, into the light, wherever that may be, whether it's and you get repacked up and sent back in another life, whether you get shipped off to another planet, whether it's another dimension, whether it's heaven, whatever you want to believe, folks. But I believe there's definitely something, after death. I believe that, for sure. I've done this too much now, and you guys have seen some of my last couple episodes where I've done the dowsing rods with Stacy there with me. He even did a divination on one of them. The rods are being moved by something. We're getting answers from things. I've heard EVPs. I've been doing this a long time. When you're out there in the field and you are constantly around it, or as much as experienced people have, that's when when you can honestly say, look, based on everything, something's out there. Yeah. That's all I can say. Out of all the years, I can just say something is past death. That's all I can really say. I can't tell you who. I can't tell you God, Jesus. Those are all personal faiths. I believe in Jesus and God. That's how I believe in that. But I can't tell you that for certainty with evidence type thing. That's something people have to have faith in. So everybody's got their own beliefs. Everybody's got their own faith. All I can say is over all the years, I know something's beyond death.
Yeah. I'm beyond the idea of just being faith. It is as real and interactive in my life as, my computer system. My computer is actually spookier than the world of the spirits, because you don't know what's really happening inside your computer. It's
especially connected to the internet.
Really, there's all kinds of stuff. It's spying on you. It's telling on you, and it's giving people information that you don't even know about you. Whereas the dead are very interactive with your life in a helpful way. So it's beyond the idea of just faith. It is a fact of life.
But folks, I think we're going to start wrapping up the show. Hopefully, you gain some information on that. If you watch this show all the way through, I love you. I thank you for that. That's a big compliment. If you made it through this show, I think Bob might actually made it through the show, so that's good. He was there most of all the way. So, folks, I want to play one last thing for you here, real quick. I haven't done this in my last few shows, but I'm gonna play this one last thing for you, and we'll come back. We'll say our goodbyes. All right, here we go.
Your team has been chosen. You must complete all of the tasks. I do not tolerate failure.
All right, so yeah, I had to play that for you guys. So if you need to go to Paraflix, check out Para Explorers. I promise you, we will start filming more of that series. Life's been hectic these last 6 months, really, since episode 1 really came out. It came out at the end of June, so it's about 6 months. But there is a few short films that I did on there. You've got to go check those out. In fact, I think I'm going to make sure I'm going to upload the full short films, which one's only like a minute, one's 2 minutes. But I'm going to upload them to YouTube now that Halloween's over. I'm going to upload, make sure that, because I think I had the trailers on there, like the teasers. So I'm just going to have the full short films for you guys. I'm going to have that on there. And then I am looking at, Stacy, I want you to tell the folks what you got going on with Udemy and stuff. But also, I just want to tell you folks, I've got an active investigation that I'm trying to get out to. We may do some live from there. We're definitely going to film. We're going to investigate. Again, it's just trying to line up the right time with the clients. They have to work. I have, pretty much 3 jobs essentially. So I have like Thursday nights and Sunday nights to do anything. And sometimes my weekends are taken. So folks, I'm trying to get out there and get you some field stuff. But we do have some of that coming up, even though with Christmas coming up, there's a lot of feel good stuff. We are going to look at maybe some nocturnal November and some December debauchery or something. I don't know. We'll do something fun more as we go. Remember, every Thursday nights. Stacy, what do you got coming up? Tell the folks what you got going on.
The courses on Udemy, you can look those up. It's udemy.com. Just, look up my name, you can spell it out, and I will, pop up with 15 courses that you can choose from. Everything from remote viewing, learning how to remote view. And I walk you through it step by step, how to get in contact with your psychic side. And you can be as psychic as a rock and be better than Nostradamus when I'm done with you. So it's one of these things where I didn't make it up. I didn't design the system. It was developed by the United States military with your tax dollars. So you might as well learn what it is that they discovered with this, black op, experiments that they were doing, creating the remote viewing program. You can learn hoodoo and conjure, which is essentially, Southern folk magic and witchcraft, and learn how to prep if you're completely oblivious on where to start on, preparing yourself for what's coming down the pike.
And that's really important. That's really important nowadays too. So, I mean, with everything going on in the world, that's really important.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, if you don't recognize that the world is going to be in a world of hurt, at least for the coming decade, I don't know what to tell you. because it's in your face now, and that's what you need to actually. If you are prepared, you're not going to be subject to a lot of the things that are going to come down because you're going to be free. They're not going to be able to hold food over your head. You know, you get the Fauci ouchie, or you're not going to eat. If you've got food, you don't have to worry about the Fauci ouchie. So
right. And I again, folks, I would highly recommend you look at his courses because, like, even though I didn't finish the remote viewing yet, but I really enjoyed it. I like the part I got to, which was I got fairly deep into it. I really enjoyed it. And that's being honest. And then I would love to look at maybe even the prepping course. I know a lot about prepping, but not really. I mean, it's like you know a lot, but then really when you start diving into it, you don't know as much as you think you knew. And if you ever watch that show Doomsday Preppers or whatever, what's the one where they test people, or they give them the scores, the rating scores? Is that the Doomsday Preppers? Like that's kind of cool in a way because like some of these people, it's like you think they're pretty good, and like then they get this kind of lower rating. They point out the weaknesses and stuff. So,
And a lot of it comes down to calorie count. You know, how long are you going to live in this scenario based off of what you have, not what you're capable of doing and your skills in hunting. They don't even count that. It is your what do you have?
Right.
Live with what you got. And a lot of people, they only get 6 months worth of food and they think they've got 5 years worth, and they don't, because the calorie count just doesn't add up.
I think it depends on the type of a post-apocalyptic world that I live in. If it's anything like Walking Dead, then I'm screwed. I just know that. It's like I'm overweight. I only have a limited number of ammo. I'm not going to outrun anybody right now. I used to be good. I had some really good wheels even while I was overweight. But here as of lately, I've lost a lot of my ability to run. I'm going to be screwed. I'm just telling you that. Now, for me to survive, like I would have to be like John Goodman in like Cloverfield, where I got like the cool underground bunker that's really well defended, and you know, because I think he had a cool setup. I think he actually had a cool setup, even though the whole movie had a different little plot ending. But as far as that's the only way I probably could really survive some type of things if I'm just absolutely hidden underground in a cool full size like house or whatever, and it's stocked, and I've got all this, and I can be self-sustained. I'd probably be all right then.
Well, a lot of people actually that wouldn't, and science has done this with the Earth Dome project, where they got 8 scientists in this massive dome with it was self-sustaining, all this other kind of stuff. They not only became malnutritioned after just a few months, but they were ready to kill each other. And they had all of this room, they had beautiful plants and food and all of this stuff at their disposal, and they were scientists. They knew all of the stuff, but they were just so cut off from the rest of the world that they ended up losing their minds too.
Isn't that the one where Pauly Shore was with them? I mean, because I would probably kill myself if I had him around me too.
Yeah, no, that was
stuck in a post-apocalyptic with Pauly Shore. No offense, Pauly. But if you acted like your movie characters, but what I've seen of you in real life, you seem kind of cool. But I don't know, man. I'm just saying, certain people, right? I can imagine like being stuck in there like for, even just a couple of months. It's like a couple months straight with some people. Yeah, I mean, that's always that factor. But Bob said, hey, he said one of the better shows. He said Josh and Stacy always put on a great show. Yeah, thanks, Bob. Well, hey, that's probably because you got to monopolize the chat tonight too. So that's probably why you really liked it too. So Bob had a lot of chat. We're kind of missing some regulars tonight. My wife out driving back from Knoxville in the rain. She should be hopefully getting home real soon. Checked on her during the show. So for those of you that saw me mouthing some words, my mic was muted, and I had to call her real quick and check on her while Stacy was talking. But just wanted to make sure everybody gets home. But guys, I really appreciate you guys watching this. Again, thanks to Stacy for co-hosting. It's been a great show. I love talking about near-death experiences and crossing over and just that process of death in that sense. Because again, that's where everybody's curious. We naturally have this fascination of immortality, or what happens when we pass away. So guys, Stacy, any last parting words?
No, other than it's been fun as always.
Awesome. Well, guys, remember, tune in every Thursday nights at 9:00 for our live show, whether it's here in the studio or wherever it may take us. I try to do something every Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern. So join us, like, subscribe, share, and remember, folks, we'll see you next week. Seek the truth.
See you later.